Hey, Mr. Richards here. Today's lesson in grade 7 is going to be Unit 4, Lesson 4. In our first question, we have a balance being shown. How can we use the balance to find the value of x? Well, these balances represent equations. And so on the one side, on the left side here, we have 3 of those x's. So we can write that as 3x. And then we have a positive 5, and that's going to equal 5, 10, 15, 20. Now, I'm going to kind of combine some steps here. My goal, whenever I solve equations, is to get that variable alone, to get that x alone. I want to find out what the value of 1x is. And so the first thing I need to do is to get rid of this 5 on the left side. But if I get rid of a 5 on the left side of an equation, I also have to get rid of a 5 on the right side. So the equation is still balanced. Now what that means in this equation is to subtract 5 from both sides of the equation. The opposite of adding 5 is subtracting 5. And so what we're left with here is 3x. The 5 minus 5 is 0. It cancels out. Equals 20 minus 5 is 15. And now we have to figure out, okay, I have 3 x's. I have 3 5s. So if I divide these 3 into what's left here, each x gets a 5. So x equals 5. In other words, 3 times x equals 15. Divide by 3, divide by 3, and x is going to equal 5. Well, what about the next one? Well, it appears I have these groups of x plus 2's equaling all these 2's. All right, well, how many of the x plus 2's do I have? Well, here's x plus 2. That's one of the groups. There's 1, 2, 3 of these x plus 2's, and that's going to equal 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Now this equation here, you have 2 options to solve. The first option is to distribute. So I could distribute this 3 times the x and times the 2. So this is going to leave us with 3 x's plus 6 equals 12. And sure enough, if you look at this balance, you can see 1, 2, 3 x's, and then 1, 2, 3 2's is 2, 4, 6, and that equals the 12. Then we could subtract 6 from both sides, as the opposite of addition is subtraction. We're then left with 3x equals 6. Well, 3 times a number equals 6. What's that number? The opposite of multiplication is division. So if I divide by 2 on both sides here, I'm sorry, not by 2. I skipped a step. Oh, silly me. Not skipped a step, but one step ahead in my head. Don't divide by 2. Don't do that. Divide by 3, because that's what that number is. And you can see why I wrote 2. X equals 2. Oh, the other option, when you have 3 times x plus 2 equals 12. You could, instead of distributing first, just divide the whole thing by 3. That's just 3 times something. Well, if I divide the left side by 3, I have to divide the right side by 3. And so this cancels out. What we're left with is x plus 2 is going to equal 4. And actually, we don't even need those parentheses there anymore. So x plus 2 is going to equal 4. And, well, the opposite of addition is subtraction. Subtract 2 from both sides. And what we're going to be left with here is x equals, because the 2 minus 2 cancels, 2. Two different ways of solving the same equation to get us to the same solution of x equals 2. Moving on to question 2, we've got a new puppy. It's going to be enclosed in her backyard. The enclosure is in the shape of a hexagon, with one pair of opposite sides running the same distance along the length of 2 parallel flower beds. A sketch of the enclosure is shown below. If the perimeter is 137 feet, what is the length of each side that runs along the flower bed? Write an equation to represent the situation and solve using algebraic properties. Describe each property you use in solving the equation. Now, let's add up all the sides. We have n plus 10 plus 12 plus n plus 15 plus 20, and now we're back to the n. Now, perimeter, you're adding up all the sides, and so it says the perimeter is 137 feet, so this is going to add up to be 137. I don't know what those two ends are. Oh, two ends. Two ends. 2n. And then 10 plus 12 is 22, plus 15 is 37, plus 20 is 57. 2n plus 57 is going to equal 137, and now I have a two-step equation. And if you're thinking about describing these number properties here, I just combine by terms, simplified. Now, the opposite of addition is subtraction. So if I subtract 57 from both sides here, what we are left with, on the left side, 2n, 57 minus 57 cancels. 7 minus 7 is 0. And then 13, or borrow, or however you want to do that, 13 minus 5 gets us an 8. So 2n is now equal to 80. So these two missing sides add up to 80. Well, 2 times that missing side equals 80, so divide by 2 on both sides. And now n is going to equal 40. And I'm looking for units here, and I don't think there's units, so n is going to equal, 137 feet. So n is going to equal 40 feet. So we started the question by writing down the sides, set it equal to 137 because that's the perimeter. Then we combined the n plus n to be 2n. 10 plus 12 plus 15 plus 20 was the 57. Equal 137. We want to get to solve for n. And so we subtracted the 57 because that's the opposite of addition. And then we divided by 2 on both sides because that's the opposite of multiplication. So we get n equals 40 feet. And then we have a bunch of equations here. Let's go for it. Remember, there's two ways to solve this one. Sometimes you could divide by 12, and this will be nice. Sometimes it's just easier to distribute. And in this question, I'm just going to distribute. 12 times x is 12x. 12 times a negative 2 is a minus, or negative 24, equals 72. So my first step was to distribute. The opposite of minus 24 is adding 24. So we're going to add 24 to both sides here. This cancels. We're left with 12x equals 96. 12 times x equals 96. Divide by 12 on both sides. 12 divided by 12 is 1. 96 divided by 12 is 8. So x is going to equal 8. And one neat thing about equations, my favorite parts of equations, is you can always know that you're right or wrong. How? By checking it. By saying, I'm going to say x equals 8. So if I go 12 times 8 minus 2 should equal 72, sure enough, 8 minus 2 is the 6. 12 times 6 is 72. And 72 equals 72. And so check steps can be really helpful. Here, negative 1/3 x plus 4 equals negative 2. Well, if our goal is to get the x alone, the first thing we need to move is this adding 4. So subtract 4 from both sides. And this is where our integers become really important. We have negative 1/3 x. The plus 4 minus 4 cancels. Equals, why is it really important? Well, negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. Have to know how to do those integers in order to solve equations. Now, negative 1/3, if I want this to become a 1, I can multiply it by its reciprocal, which is negative 3. So I can multiply both sides here by negative 3. What that ends up doing is negative 3 times negative 1/3 is a positive 1, 1x, equals negative times a negative is positive, so 18. X equals 18. And if you wanted to check that one, we have negative 1/3 times 18 plus 4 should be negative 2. And sure enough, negative 1/3 times 18 is negative 6. Plus 4 should equal negative 2. And yes, negative 2 equals negative 2. So x equals 18 is our solution, just like x equals 8 was our solution there. All right, C. I need you to see, pun intended, is that your P is right here. We're going to do something with this minus 2 last. The first thing we need to do is take care of this 5 6/10. And so it's a positive 5 6/10 right now. The minus is with the 2. It's 5 6/10. If I want to cancel it out, I have to subtract it. And so let's subtract 5 6/10 from both sides. Because what that ends up doing is this 5 6/10 minus 5 6/10 cancels. That's what we want. Then subtract minus 2p. That's all that's left on the left side now. That's going to equal, let's see, 13 minus 5 6/10. That's 13, 0. Borrow if you need. Subtract this thing out. You get 4 in the 10th spot. And then 12, essentially, minus 5 is 7. If negative 2p equals 7 4/10. Well, all that's left is now dividing by negative 2. And at this point, remember, this is a minus 2p. One of the most common mistakes made in this for some people all the way through high school is that we forget to bring down that minus. We just write a positive 2. It's a negative 2. It's a minus 2. So we're dividing by negative 2 on both sides. Negative 2 divided by negative 2 is a positive 1p. And so p is going to equal, don't be afraid to long divide when you need. You get a 3 and decimal point 7. So p equals positive divided by a negative is a negative 3 7/10. And I do believe that was the last example here, and sure enough, it is. And so that's it for this lesson. It was grade 7, unit 4, lesson 4. Good luck.